What's happening? MC Marcus Chapman here, ready to break down show number 19. Yeah, today is September 19th, 2017, and we're talking about a show that was done on November 19th, 2001 in the Dallas-Fort Worth market at KKDA-FM, alias K104. All right. So here is the background on this particular show. When I started at K104, I was doing 6 to 10. Did that for a few months, and then they decided they wanted to have a team of people do nights because the competing station, which was 97.9 The Beat, which was owned by Radio 1 and still is, they had just started in September 2000. So they started September 2000. They had a team of 3 people doing nights, and 104 hired me in December 2000. But after a few months, they decided, we want to have a team to go against their team to make it even and all this. So they came up with this concept called the Crunk Crew. Crunk Crew, it was phase 1, phase 2, even though I remember specifically telling us not to say that anymore after about a week or so. Not to say phase 1, phase 2. So phase 1, you had a cat named Man at Large and Mel the Mac. They were in the studio. Then you also had Rock T, Reggie D, and the Streets and Cocoa Butter. All right. Then phase 2, it was originally myself and a guy named Big Craig. It was going to be, the original plan was for me and Rock T to do the show together because Rock had hosted 6 to 10 before I did on 104. So the idea of the two 6 to 10 hosts, former 6 to 10 hosts doing the show together, that was going to be the thing. But Rock had gotten comfortable being in the streets. They had moved him around a few times, 6 to 10, 10 to 2, this and that. So he was he didn't really want to be a part of another K104 experiment, so to speak. So he wanted to stay in the streets, and then they decided to put Big Craig and me together. That didn't work too well. All right. And then they added a cat named Houston Harris, H-Dub. He was in there with me and Craig. And, that worked a little better because Houston and I got along. Craig and Houston got along, but me and Craig still didn't get along. So after a while, that didn't work out. Matter of fact, there's a show posted from March 15th of 2001 called The Worst Show of My Career. And it's funny to hear it now. But yeah, that just wasn't going to work. So eventually they ended up hiring Cat Daddy, who's still at K104. They had him doing late nights, the late night creep. And they put me on the street team. So even though I wasn't on the air every day, I was doing like a Sunday show. And then I was in the streets Monday through Friday, I think it was, or Saturday. I forget. It was some Saturdays I remember working. But yeah, I think it was Saturday and then Monday through Thursday, something like that. And it gave me a chance to really get out and learn the market a little bit better. Because when I was doing 6 to 10 Monday through Friday, I was also hosting Saturday 4 to 8 in the afternoon. And it was real difficult to get out and really learn the market because it seemed like I was at work all the time, 6 days a week. So me being on the street team, that was the case for a while. And then at a certain point, they decided to put me back on every day. And this time I was hosting overnights. And I'm going to get more into detail on that whole, situation of how I ended up getting back on the air and a different post that I'm going to do for a different show. But hosting the overnight started in July of 2001. The last, July 17th, somewhere in there. And I ended up hosting the overnight show from July 17, 2001 to July 26, 2002. And even though overnight is like the least glamorous shift in radio, I actually had the most fun in the Dallas-Fort Worth market when I was hosting overnight, much more so than I had when I was doing 6 to 10 or the late night 10 to 2. Because for one, it got me back in the studio after being out of it for a while. 2, I was back in the studio by myself as opposed to having to be with somebody else. And then also because I took a totally different approach to doing overnight than I did any other shift I'd ever done. Before that, all the shows I did at WGCI, TLC in Indianapolis, and the earlier shows at K104, I came up with features to try to get people to call and be involved in the show. But with the overnight, number one, K104 didn't do any contests overnight. So there were no prizes, so I couldn't piggyback off of that to do a feature, like I had the MCA Today countdown when I did 6 to 10 and people kept track of the songs for a chance to win. Wasn't none of that on overnight because they didn't do that. They didn't do any prizes. So instead of coming up with features and trying to get people to call for something in particular, like a show, every other show I'd done, I kind of approached it like the anti-show. And I got the concept from my all-time favorite group, Parliament Funkadelic. They were known for doing these really extravagant stage shows with the mothership landing and the costumes and all this major stuff happening. But at the height of their popularity in 1978, when the song One Nation Under Groove was out by Funkadelic, George Clinton took the band on what he called an anti-tour. So instead of doing big stadiums, they started playing small clubs. Instead of the costumes, they just wore like army fatigues. They didn't have any props, no mothership, no flashlight. Well, they did bring the flashlight in, I think, on one show I saw. But they didn't have all the elaborate stuff that they became known for. It was just them playing the music, singing, raw, right there for the audience, for a smaller, more intimate crowd. And so that was kind of a different approach. It was a surprise to a lot of people. And they eventually went back to the bigger tours and the stadiums and everything. But that tour, he said, was to kind of keep them from ego tripping and on being stars and kind of just get back to the basics of being musicians and singers and connecting stronger with the audience. So for this particular overnight show, my approach was, like I said, sort of an anti-show. Instead of coming up with all these features to get people to call and participate in something in particular, I just gave out the phone number. And when I did that, I had no idea what I was going to get, and it opened it up for anybody to call, to say or ask anything. And that's exactly what happened. The overnight audience is kind of a mixture of different types of people. You got college kids staying up doing homework or whatever. You got badass little kids that should have been in the bed sleep, but they was up. Parents probably wasn't watching them, whatever the case may be. Little kids calling. You have people at work, trying to stay up. You have people getting up to go to work. It was a big mixture, especially during the week. Because this was, I believe I was on like Sunday night through Thursday night. Yeah, so Monday morning technically through Friday morning. And then I had one more show on the weekend. Sometimes I was on Sunday afternoon or what have you. But those overnight shows, you never really knew what you were going to get. And so it made it a lot more interesting because, like I said, all types of different people would call in, and I never knew what they were going to say when I answered the phone. So these particular shows that I was doing at this time, this overnight on K104, these were probably the wildest shows that I ever did in my radio career in terms of what people were calling and saying. People would call and say something, anything. Matter of fact, I put together a compilation a few years back that I call Outrageous Overnights, where it's like all these different phone calls of people who called me during those hours. Like sometimes I start at 1 in the morning. I would always end at about 5:30 because Skip Murphy and Company, the morning show, was coming on after that. And they started 5:30, and I would start at typically 1 in the morning, sometimes 2, depending on the day. And if I was working the Saturday night going into Sunday morning, which I did sometimes, then those hours would be like 2 to 5 or something like that, because it was some pre-recorded shows that came on. This particular show from November 18, 2001 was a Sunday night going into Monday morning. And typically what I had learned was that is the slowest time to be on the radio. It was the time where you had the least amount of people who would call because, folks that were winding down, getting ready for the week. At least when you did overnight on Friday going into Saturday, like I did on the after set, which is an example in show number 20, the one from before this one, in the MC25. you have people, there was still a party atmosphere because it was the middle of the weekend. Saturday night going into Sunday morning, you could kind of piggyback off the Saturday night party vibe and take that into Sunday morning. Sunday night going into Monday morning, you didn't have none of that. So it was usually really slow. But in this case, it wasn't slow at all. And the reason why I called this show Kids, Heifers, and Walmart Shirts is because of the type of calls that came in. Like I said, you normally had a lot of kids calling. I can remember one show, some kids called in asking me about the Mary J. Blige. I mean, not Mary J. Blige. It was Ja Rule, Jennifer Lopez and Ja Rule, I'm Real. And so it was a little boy and a little girl. I guess they was arguing about it at home. So they called me to ask, is that Mary J. Blige singing? And I was like, nah, that's Jennifer Lopez. And I remember the little boy said, Jennifer Lopez? Oh, hell no. And hung up a phone on me. This little boy was about 8, 9 years old. He hung up on me, but that was the type of calls you would get. And on this particular show, it was a different group of kids who called. It was a little girl. And she, asked, she was like, are they allowed to curse on the song? I'm like, no, they're not cursing on that because, it's the radio. We can't play curse words. And she was like, I told that heifer. And I thought that was hilarious, so I ended up playing that card. I think I played that a couple of times. And maybe this show or a different show. But this was the one where she called the first time, I believe. And you had other kids calling in, in this case, kids were calling because they were out of school for Thanksgiving. And you hear me joking with them about how when I was a kid, we didn't have the whole week, but they had the whole week off. And, different kids were calling, whether it was little kids or teenagers. And one of the things that I'm very proud of as a personality is that when the kids would call, sometimes we would have fun. They'd say funny stuff. I'd say something funny. But I could tell when, especially with the teenagers, if they kind of needed some guidance. If they were doing something wrong and they were messing up, I felt like it was up to me to let them know, nah, that ain't really what you need to be doing, okay? I can remember one girl calling. It wasn't even on the air. She called and told me one night, this was like a Tuesday going into Wednesday, that she had just got home. This was like maybe 3-something in the morning. And she called saying she had just got home because she was out having sex with her boyfriend. She snuck out the house and got back in. And so because she said she wanted to hear The Greatest Sex by R. Kelly. And I was like, why you want to hear that? And so she told me what she had just done. She's like, I just finished doing that, my boy. And I was like, nah, like that ain't cool. Like you thinking it's cool, you sneaking out the house. I'm like, your parents, out here working, trying to provide for you. You sneaking out the house, doing something you think is cool and it ain't cool. Like how would your parents feel if they found out you was doing that? I'm sure they would be heartbroken because you out here doing wrong. And this ain't, it may seem like it's cool because it's being promoted on all this different stuff, but that ain't how you supposed to be doing. 15 years old, that ain't happening. If you get pregnant or something, So I was giving her all these scenarios and let her know that ain't what she needed to be doing. And I remember I talked to her for maybe a good 10 minutes, which normally I didn't talk to people but maybe 1 or 2 minutes, 3 at the most. And I remember when she hung up the phone, about 5 minutes later, she called me back. And she said she wanted to thank me for taking the time out to talk to her. And she said something like, at least somebody out here cares about what I'm doing. And I remember that really struck me because it let me know a lot of these kids out here who doing wrong things is because they don't have anybody guiding them in the right way and telling them, no, you need to go this way and not that way. Because a lot of times it's not that they bad, they just need somebody to show them the right way. And a lot of radio personalities I've heard over the years, they try so hard to be funny that when a scenario comes up like that, they'll just joke around and act like the kid is all right. And so they thinking that they doing okay because somebody who's in a position that they respect kind of co-sign for it. And I wasn't going to co-sign for stuff like that. So I got calls like that sometime. And I got some other wild calls on this particular show. The very first call is from prostitutes. Talking about they was out in the street looking for money, and I'm playing off of that. And then, one of them said, I said something like, show them what you're working with, like, a mystical shake it fast. And she was like, "Oh, you might fall out. You see what we working with, all this ass we got." I said, "Oh, hell no, I got to go now." But people would call saying crazy stuff like that. I remember one time somebody called, asked K104 to marry her. I'm like, how you gonna marry a radio station? But in this show, you hear some wild calls like that as well. And sometimes I would, like I said, guide the kids in the right way. One kid called saying he was calling up girls at their houses to see what they was doing because they was off from school. Well, this was before everybody had cell phones, so he wasn't calling no cell phone. He was calling people's house phones. And I'm like, you can't be calling nobody's house no 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, man. What's wrong with you, But I would tell them in a way that I felt that they would accept it. I didn't try to chastise them and, berate them, but I let them know that ain't cool, dog. That ain't what you want to do. These are the consequences. In this case, you hear a kid call in saying she was suspended from school for cussing out the teacher, and I'm like, no, you can't be doing that, and I let her know, no, that is not the way to go. You got to respect authority so you don't end up in trouble. That's why you're suspended now. So stuff like that, I kind of took pride in the way I would deal with the kids when they called the radio station, because if they was wrong, they were wrong, and I let them know, but I do it in a way that they could accept it and not feel bad, but they would know that they needed to do better. So that was kind of one of the roles that I tried to play, and I think that's one of the reasons why I chose this show, because this show is a good example of me doing that and taking the time out to talk to some of these teenagers and let them know what they needed to be doing. Because they would call and say all types of stuff. And then there were other times where it was just people saying funny stuff. The Walmart shirt thing happened because a girl called from Walmart, and we were talking about, people buying clothes because she worked in the clothes department. I'd never heard of anybody buying clothes from Walmart. So, we started talking about how, people would be able to tell. I said women can tell if your clothes are cheap. I look at this dude, this cheap ass Walmart shirt, and I just bought it like a Sean John or something for like $60 or something. So, it's a good range of entertainment, from all different types of people. But at the same time, I knew when it was time to let folks know, particularly the kids, that they needed to get themselves together. So this particular show, November 19, 2001, is the one I chose, in the number 19 position in the MC25. Also check out that Outrageous Overnights compilation. You hear a lot of funny calls in that. You just want to laugh. Listen to that thing for, I forget how long it is, maybe about 15 minutes. A lot of funny stuff in there. But this one, you get the funny and you get the consciousness that I brought because I took the time to talk to the kids. So I feel that it's a good representation of something that I brought to the radio industry. So it comes in at number 19. And coming in next at number 18 is another show I did in the Dallas-Fort Worth market many years later at the competing station. Yeah, see how that one turned out. And that one wasn't overnight. That was in the middle of prime time. That's coming up next at number 18. But right now, enjoy number 19. November 19, 2001. Kids, heifers, and Walmart shirts. MC Marcus Chapman on K104, Dallas-Fort Worth. Check that out. All right, later.